All right, Marco Palmero, founder of Ulysses in Dubai. In this video, I'm going to be sharing with you a quick guide on buying a small business or a big business for that matter in the UAE. So we're going to be very specific in terms of geography. And we're going to be talking about the United Arab Emirates. Now, I want to share some thoughts, some mistakes, and some lessons that I've learned on critical aspects of the deal process, so that you can potentially avoid these mistakes if you're planning to buy a business for yourself or for your company and your organization. So this is going to be a very open discussion around the topics that lead to a deal. And I'm going to be sharing with you some of the things that I've learned as I went through this process time and time again when I was negotiating deals, negotiating small business acquisitions for ourselves as Ulysses, but also for other clients that we represented. So I got my little checklist here, and hopefully I will not forget anything because this is going to be quite a long video, to be frank with you. Now, let's buckle up and let's dive into this. And we start with the ethics part. Now, ethics in UAE are a very complex subject, because 90% of people are expatriates, which means that everybody is coming to the country with a set of ethics, moral codes, and behaviors about how business should be handled. Now, not necessarily you might be aligned with all the people that are within the UAE, but the point is you got to be aware that different people are going to think differently. In order for you to interact with different cultures, it is important to create a solution that is not a cookie cutter sort of model or approach, because that won't cut it, won't help you in being successful here, at least based on my experience. And it won't enable you to access all the opportunities that might be available to you. Now, in terms of ethics and ways of thinking, the 90% of people who are expatriates are first generation expatriates, which means that a lot of them bring to the country different types of mindset, and there's no such thing as a common way of thinking in the country. So the first thing I needed to learn when I wanted to negotiate a business transaction was, who is this person that I'm talking to? Where is he coming from? What is his background and his, kind of like social and economic background? Because that really affects the transaction, really affects the conversation. And it also creates dynamics where something might be very important for a specific person, but it might not be as important to somebody else. In addition to that, I might add, the way you are perceived by different people will greatly differ. And that is something you must be aware of, because despite the fact people will never tell you to your face, it will be something that can or cannot help you in getting a deal done. At least that's what I found, after having thousands of discussions around business acquisitions, really. So I named this section ethics, although it's probably better to define it as the background of each individual. Given the fact the UAE are such a dynamic environment, it is important for a buyer or an investor or somebody buying a business to understand where's the other side coming from, what's important for them and to them, and what is less important to them. And based on that, make your own judgments and assumptions. Of course, we all understand that business buying is based on numbers and figures, and those things cannot change. Those things are fixed, and they're kind of like equal to everybody. The point is, there are a lot of other things surrounding these figures which can or cannot help you in doing a deal. And so mindful of that, we want to dive deeper into the understanding of what the other side is all about, and then create a strategy that really matches their mindset and their way of thinking around business deals, business acquisitions, transactions, and so on and so forth. What I've learned over time is that there are specific ethnicities, if we want to call it this way, that are more comfortable in negotiating with. I'm not going to name, which ones, but the point is, I'm sure that's going to be the case for a lot of you. They're going to be people who are easier for you to talk to, and others that are more difficult for you to talk to. That will create a situation where you might want to be more focused on specific ethnic groups other than just targeting everybody. But that is entirely up to you. My point is, and this is just my personal thought really, if you really want to master the UAE and the Middle East in terms of negotiations, you got to be open and willing to learn how to interact and deal with all cultures. Otherwise, you're always going to be very short-sighted and very deprived to some extent, because you're not going to be able to take advantage of an opportunity if it presents itself, right? And so I think my take on this is, before we actually dive into a deal and start talking about a business acquisition itself, it is important to understand what's the other side is all about, and how we can approach that discussion in the best possible way. That's going to play a huge role in the success of the interaction and in the negotiation, despite the fact you might not even want to buy the business. But the point is, going through these steps and learning how to deal with different people will pay dividends down the line, because it will come back at you later on once you might have a discussion that is worth having. And at that point, you will be prepared because you already gone through the steps, you already gone through the preparations, and you already learned how to interact with different ethnicities, different cultures, different mindsets. And so I think this is kind of like an introduction to the broader guide around business buying, but I feel it's important to spend some time on it, because earlier in the day I used to have a very cookie cutter approach, probably because I was coming from the US, right? So I thought everything we did in the US was right and everything else was wrong. But I came to the realization that that wasn't necessarily the case, right? And so learning that really enabled me to step up my game in terms of negotiations, right? I'm not even talking about closing deals or what have you, but I'm talking about building up the relationship in the right way, interacting with the other side in the right way, and also understanding clearly their position. Because, and this is a very important point, other than having 90% of people being expatriates, most of these cultures have English as a secondary language. And so if you're watching this video and English is your primary language, you might not find that being a particular issue because you're already fluent in English. But for other people, interacting in English might be more complex and difficult than it is for you. And for others, the meaning of certain words might translate in something completely different into their own language. And that really complicates the interactions and the exchange with another person, because you might be using a word that means something to you in your native language, but that person is going to translate that word in English into his own language, and he's going to interpret it in a completely different way. I know it sounds crazy, and it might sound like a stupid thing to say when you're talking about business acquisition, but I can guarantee you that is absolutely true. I happen to change my communication style many times and started to avoid certain words simply because I knew they could lead us to trouble into a discussion. Not because they were wrong or bad in any shape, manner, or form, but because they could be misunderstood and people didn't fully get the meaning of these things. And so I started to find ways to convey my message in a very clear and precise way, depending on the person I was in front of. Of course, if I'm talking with an Englishman, I'm not gonna bother, right? But if I'm talking with somebody who doesn't speak English well, then I'm gonna adapt my strategy accordingly so that we can have a productive discussion and ultimately achieve the desired outcome. Because most people might say, Marco, why are you talking about this stuff so much? It doesn't really matter. The point is, it is in your own best interest to have a productive discussion, because if you don't understand what the other side is where the other side is coming from, and you're not able to convey your point effectively, then you're going to be involved with transactions that are just wrong, and you're going to miss other opportunities that might be very, very valuable. One example I can give you is that I've been into deals where I felt from the very beginning the deal was hot as hell, while in reality the deal was a piece of shit, to be frank with you, and I couldn't spot it because the guy thought about our interest in a different way. So initially he thought we were interested in buying the real estate of the business and not the business operation. And so we all got hot and bothered over it. And the moment he sent over the information, we realized we were talking about a property, in a building, so to speak. And that is not what we do. And so, as you can clearly see, the misinterpretation of certain messages can really destroy a relationship and communication. And the reason why I want to avoid that, and I want you to avoid this, is because that is also something that can compromise some relationship, because then the other side is not going to understand why are you backing out of something. He might take it in the wrong way, and that might create a lot of different dynamics that you don't necessarily want to be involved with. So my point is, the UAE and Middle East environment is very complex, difficult to navigate, and it is important to approach it in the right way. Thankfully, I got 5 partners with 150 years of combined experience in the region, so I was able to navigate that effectively because they knew how the dynamics worked here, and they were able to point me into the right direction. If you don't have people like that, and you're just coming from another country, it might be worthwhile to work with somebody on the ground who already knows these things and can help you in navigating those issues. But this is just an introduction and kind of like the foundation of what it is, the business buying environment in the UAE. And I think provided you understand the complexity of the dynamics here, then we can start talking about all the other aspects that I want to cover with you, which are more on the technical side. So hopefully they will be interesting and exciting for you to continue watching this video. Now, a funny thing I realized early in the days when I came here was that there were just tons of brokers in town. I mean, I've been in Europe, United States, many places really, and I never found a place that had so many brokers that were selling anything really, from real estate, to businesses, to whatever you name it really. And as I dive deeper into this business buying kind of thing, I realized that many times people do want to have an intermediary in the negotiations, not necessarily because they need it, they just want it. Maybe it gives them an extra level of reassurance, or they value the fact that somebody they know referred them to a buyer in that particular case. A lot of the stuff that happens here is based on relationship, and trust is built through relationships. And so I can kind of explain to myself why a lot of people work through brokers or people they know who then take a commission out of the deal. And early in the day, I used to get a little bit pissed off about it, because every single time I had an interaction with a seller, there was a broker in between. And I used to say to myself, well, I must be doing something wrong, because back in the day in the US or in other places, I was able to source transactions without using a broker. So I don't know what's wrong here. But then I realized that many times this is just part of the business environment here, and the way people build relationships and build trust with other parties, like buyers like ourselves. Now, ultimately, I don't want to misguide you here. There are deals that can be found without a broker. What I'm saying here is just that a lot of deals, more deals percentage-wise, are represented by a broker compared to other parts of the world, based on my experience. Now, there are off-market opportunities, which are generally the better ones that can be found, and there are so-called off-market deals. Those are more difficult to source, based on my experience, because people try to keep them confidential as much as possible, and they don't share them with anybody really. And so it's just a matter of building the relationship with that owner. And so that creates a very interesting dynamic, which is the power of network in relationship building here in the UAE and Middle East. And also one of the reasons why we developed ourselves a DealFlow service that we now provide to other companies and individuals looking to buy businesses here. Now you might wonder, why is it that you're doing something like that, Marco? Well, because of course you can focus on a lot of the businesses that are available for sale through a broker. Although I tend to believe that these opportunities are going to be less good than the ones that are off market, despite being a lot more. And one of the problems that you're going to face in that situation is that you're always going to be dealing with an intermediary, which might be a very good person, but might destroy the relationship if he sees that he's not getting what he wants out of the deal. And my perspective is that I always want to avoid having a lot of people in between. One person might be fine, but if it is just a one-on-one relationship with the seller, it is much better for me. And so out of necessity, we discussed with my partners and said, okay, how about we create a predictable strategy to source off-market deals for ourselves? And we did that. It took a lot of time. And once we got that in place, other companies started to ask us about it and wanted to leverage that effort that we put forward to their advantage. And so we started providing DealFlow to other companies, because what many people realized as they came to the region was that it was a lot more difficult to find off-market deals, and many times these off-market deals were not necessarily accessible through accountant lawyers, bankers, or other institutions that they might want to use in other countries. And so they started to realize a more bespoke, I would say a bespoke approach was needed to DealFlow, and that's why they asked us to support them with that process. Of course, there are also companies who don't want to work on off-market opportunities, and then they just stick to the deals that are listed by brokers or listed by third-party agents, which is also a very important thing to explain. There are brokers who are the very common broker agencies that you might find any place in the world. But there are also other deals that do have agents brokering the deal, but they're not necessarily brokerage firms. So it's more like a interpersonal relationship with the seller that this person has, and then he makes the interaction and he's going to get a percentage of the deal. So he's not necessarily a licensed or official broker, so to speak. Is more like an introducer. And a lot of deals are found and sold this way. My perspective again is that not all the good ones are listed this way, but still they're a very good way to get deal flow and find businesses that you might want to buy. Of course, you got to do your own due diligence. You got to build your own network of these individuals. That takes time, and that's again one of the reasons why many companies or individuals said to us, Marco, just provide us with your deal flow services. You already went through all the processes for building this network and this expertise. Just give us the leads, source the opportunities that we want, and let's be done with it. So this is just an initial consideration around brokers, ways deals are found in the UAE. And there are also other ways that you can use to source deals. I mentioned before, accounting firms, legal firms, banks, cold calling, emailing, and stuff like that. I found all these strategies to be less effective than a personal network, to be frank. And I tried them all for multiple years. So it really comes down to you. You can try them out, see how they work for you. But my perspective is that it really is an environment where interpersonal relationships are king, and they rule the world, really. And so even in business buying, that becomes a very important factor that you might want to consider if you want to get access to opportunities. And one of the reasons why I'm talking about this dynamics is because the UAE environment is quite vibrant. Companies go up for sale every single week, and from that perspective, buyers are quite lucky because there's a constant inflow of deals coming to their desk. The reason for that is quite simple. People come and go from the UAE. They set up shops, close shops, change their interests, change their goals, have situations that affect their position, and therefore they need to relocate back home. And so a lot of businesses are sold on a shorter cycle. In other parts of the world, we might see businesses that are passed on through generations that are sold only when the owner is planning to retire. That is less of an issue in the UAE, where a lot of people stay not for a long period of time. The vast majority of the population is between 25 and 55, really. Probably around 80% of the population, but I'm not 100% sure about that. So the point is, the life cycle of a business is much shorter, not in terms of businesses being founded and then closed down, but businesses being established by somebody and then sold out, and then somebody else may buy them and repeat the entire cycle over and over again. So that is a positive thing because it gives you access to tons of opportunities, but it presents a big issue, which is, one, you got to be able to ascertain whether or not these opportunities are any good, because there are a lot of turds being sold in Dubai and UAE, I'm not going to lie. So you really got to be good at spotting these, and we're going to talk about some of the things that you may want to consider later on. And secondly, some opportunities get sold fairly quickly, which is kind of complicated to understand. Because sometimes deals do take at least 4-6 weeks to complete. But the point is, a lot of people come here and buy businesses cash. Now, I don't like that approach, to be frank with you. In most cases, when sellers ask me for 100% cash payment on their business, I immediately pass on the opportunity because I identify that as a red flag. But the point is, there are dynamics that are not necessarily common to other countries that are pretty much normal here. So I've seen businesses being sold for, I don't know, $10 million paid cash at closing. I'm not saying that is always the case, but I think that can happen more often in the UAE than it happens in any other place. And that creates some issues when it comes to negotiations, because owners become delusional about the selling prices and they expect crazy terms out of their businesses, although these companies might not necessarily be worth that amount of money. And that is a lot of effort that buyers need to make in educating the owners, because some of them are really not savvy about the business processes in the business valuation metrics. So you might want to keep that in mind as you dive into the business buying arena in the Middle East, in the UAE to be more specific. My perspective has been that the level of savviness of sellers here is very, very low. And part of that is due to the market conditions and the cycles that are happening, which I just explained to you. Part might also be that a lot of them are not necessarily motivated sellers, but they're just kicking the tires, hoping to hit jackpot. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, everything is for sale in Dubai and UAE, okay? And a lot of people will entertain the idea of selling the business just hoping they can get somebody to pay them a huge price multiple so that they can happily retire on a tropical island. And many people play that game in Dubai in specific, not necessarily in the entire UAE, because they know everybody's wealthy here, right? So they try to find the rich guy who's going to overpay for the business. Funny enough, they don't realize that generally, rich people are smarter and they know, how much an asset is worth, and they have very strong counsel at their disposal to make sure they don't overpay for stuff. But still, there's some crazy dynamics that happen in the market, and so those things can complicate the transaction, especially, again, getting back to my first point, if a broker is in the middle. So if there is some education that I want to go through, generally I want to do it one-on-one with the owner, so that I have to avoid explaining stuff to two different people, if you get what I'm saying, right? It just becomes very complicated, and then the guy might not necessarily be a savvy person from a business perspective. He might not understand the business buying cycle as a whole, and as a consequence, he might advise the seller in the wrong way, and the deal may fall apart just because the guy is an idiot. So I think, getting back to the broker point, a lot of things you may want to consider when you look at businesses that are available for sale and when you're looking at buying businesses here. My perspective, and what I found to be the most effective thing for us, is to just focus on proprietary deal flow and opportunities that are sourced directly, so that, where we have a direct interaction with the owner. That is my take on brokers. Now, this is a complex point that I'm going to cover now, which is document sharing and information analysis. A short way to explain this is by saying due diligence is critical in this part of the word. Extensive due diligence is critical, because nothing is as it appears to be on paper. Believe me when I say this, I've been in many situations where I got sent audit statements by big accounting firm that were completely messed up. And I mean literally completely fucked up. And little that we can do about it. The deal was dead. But most people will make decisions on documents that they deem trustworthy, although these documents don't necessarily mean much. And I think that is a problem that is caused by the fact that sometimes people put a lot of leverage on the name they see on a paper. So if they see audits or valuation reports made by reputable company, they will trust these documents implicitly, thinking these figures are accurate and real. What I learned over the years is that Again, nothing is as it appears to be. Should always doubt everything and double check everything. Due diligence is a must, and your accounting and legal team must be on point with everything they do. It doesn't matter if you buy a big business or a small business. They always gonna cross check everything, and analyze that these figures are actually accurate and the money is actually there. I mean, I can give you probably 10 different examples of deals where they sent us audit statements maybe 2-3 times because they were going through revisions, and maybe they were sending us 1 or 2 years and then the subsequent 2 years. And every single time we found mismatches, everything was fucked up and nothing was real. And when we asked for additional information to cross-check the data, we understood that even the stuff that they provided us as a counterproof was messed up, and ultimately there was nothing that could be trusted and that could be relied on for valuation purposes. And I'm not saying this to scare you or to let's say point you into the opposite direction of the UAE, but we're just going to be realistic, and many times things are not clear. The word in this country are still evolving from a business perspective, and as a consequence, there are still things that need adjustment in terms of regulation and reporting. And so when you go ahead and want to look at assets and do due diligence on assets, my recommendation in my experience would be do a lot of due diligence and potentially spend more time on due diligence than necessary, but then at least make sure figures are accurate plus or minus 10%. If that doesn't happen, I would be very skeptical about the deal and probably wouldn't want to proceed, despite the deal might be, the best thing since sliced bread, right? So hopefully I brought this point across in the right way, because it's very complex and it's difficult to explain without showing you real life examples. The point is, a lot needs to be done in terms of due diligence if you want to really succeed at this and buy the right business, and at least buy the business that is reported on paper. That's my point, right? And again, probably one of the best investments anybody can make is in people on the ground who understand those dynamics and know how to navigate these challenges and know where to look when something doesn't look right, and they know where to find the evidence they need to find out the truth. So just some considerations that hopefully can help you address common issues when looking at businesses that are available for sale. In terms of the other points, of course, there are a lot of discussions that we can have around non-disclosure agreements, letter of intent, a purchase and sales agreement, financing. I think the overall process of a deal is pretty straightforward. I recorded a lot of videos about this, where I talk about, initial discussion, NDA, initial analysis, due diligence, LOI, purchase and sales agreement, closing. I think the nuances are really what makes all the difference, because as I told you here, there are many things that aren't necessarily as they appear to be. So you gotta work with a different set of lenses, so to speak, and understand what are you getting yourself into. If you are aware of that, then you're gonna be fine and you're not gonna have problems, especially if you work with people who already have these lenses on and they're the right advisors for you, because they can point you into the right direction and say, this thing is right, this thing is wrong. In terms of contractual stuff, I think that, of course, I'm not a legal advisor, but the NDAs, LOIs, purchase and sales agreements are pretty straightforward. I haven't found those things to be particularly different to other places, to be frank. And the thing that you might want to consider when it comes to deal execution is this point around financing, which is something I struggle with a lot initially, because I was coming from a US environment where financing was, the name of the game, really. And I felt that I could do and that I could use leverage a lot more than I can actually use, because the financial sector here is still at its very infancy, and financing is not necessarily something that you can access easily, especially if you're doing small, medium-sized deals. If we're talking about corporate, that's a whole different game. But still, there's a lot more complexity around accessing financing here. And I found that sometimes might be even worthwhile to consider cross-border financing, at least to get things going. But if you're planning to use the local financing for deals and business buying, probably you're going to be disappointed unless you're targeting deals north of $75 million, $100 million, stuff like that. If that is your price tag, then probably you're going to be fine. If you're playing below that level, it's going to be tough. And one of the examples I can give you to kind of crystallize this idea is that businesses struggle to open bank accounts here. And people don't understand why. 90% of the GDP here is generated by SMEs. And yet the support to SME is pretty bad. It's hard for small businesses to get working capital loans, for example, let alone acquisition financing or business financing for buying a business, right? And the overall mentality of the financial institutions here is that everything should be backed by something. They won't provide you any kind of financing whatsoever unless they have more than 100% coverage on that. So you want $1 million, fine, you gotta put 1 million equity down. You want financing for machinery, fine, they're gonna give you, 40% financing, you're gonna put down the 60 and they're gonna take the asset as collateral. Stuff like that, really, which, when I came here from the US, I was looking at that stuff and I was saying, this is just, that ain't possible. How is that thing happening? And you might be saying, well, Marco, you just didn't had the right relationships, right? Well, I did have pretty good relationships, and over time, my relationships improved with financial institutions, but the case is still the same. And the point is, these types of products are not really available for people. Banks are not necessarily interested in providing them. Their key focus right now is retail and corporate. They have a lot of business there. They're making tons of money with it. And so they don't have particular interest in developing the SME part of it or the mid-sized corporate part of it. And so it's just a little bit of feedback that I collected over time. If you're thinking, okay, I'm going to buy a business here and rely on local financing, you might be disappointed. So come in prepared, and provided you understand these initial challenges, then you can dive in and see what they have to say. Again, if you know somebody local or locally, they will surely help you navigate these issues. But my take on this and my personal experience has been that I shouldn't rely on financial institutions as much. That's just my point. Now, once we talk about the deal execution part of things, I think another important point that I wanted to discuss with you was the emotional part of things. Many people do get involved emotionally in the deal, independently of the size of the deal, and they aren't able to approach a transaction logically. So that's going to be something that you need to deal with. It doesn't matter the size of the business that you're trying to buy. So you can either accept it, or you can struggle with it for a long time. There are big egos here. People are quite arrogant, and especially when you're coming in to buy their business, even if they're very motivated in selling, they ain't gonna tell you that, and they're gonna play it hardball. So just be aware of it, and be aware that a lot of emotion is gonna get in the way, and you might need to deal with it before you can actually get a deal done. From an execution standpoint, I mentioned before the steps that are kind of simple, but what I found is that having trusted advisors locally really helps, of course, but that goes without saying. Another important thing is having trusted advisors who are not international people that came here for 2 or 3 years. I'm going to explain what I mean by that in a second. Let's say that you're planning to hire a big accounting firm to represent you on a deal. The partner that is going to be in charge of your case is a guy coming from the UK or the US who just spent 2 years in the United Arab Emirates. Forget about it. That guy might have a wealth of knowledge and expertise in representing clients worldwide, but has no fucking clue about the UAE. And he's not going to know everything that there is to know to win the case, to win the deal. He might have other people below him, associates and people like that, that know that stuff. But these guys might not have the right strategic approach to find these types of solutions. So my point is, I'd rather stick to guys that might not be at a fancy firm, but they know what they do very, very well, and they've been doing it in the region for thousands of years, really, 20, 30 years, because they're going to get the job done. And again, they're going to know which stone needs to be turned and what are the places where they should look in terms of analysis, in terms of due diligence, in terms of negotiation, in terms of buttons that they can push to get your deal across. And so, yeah, I feel that that's probably one of the best things you can consider when you're planning to buy a business here. Of course, a lot of other things that I can add to that. One of which is we recently started working with other companies other than buying our own businesses. So if you do want to get involved with DealFlow or with acquisitions with us, be happy to find out a way where we can support you. We generally take on only a few cases per quarter, really, because we are very committed in our own acquisitions and with a few clients that we work with. But provided there are some available slots, we'll be happy to help you navigate these issues. We recently did an engagement with a big group, hospital group, looking to source hospital opportunities across the region. That was very interesting. And so we work really with small businesses, individuals, but also big corporates. The point is, I can really talk for hours about the mistakes, lessons, and points that I figure out over time when dealing in the UAE and Middle East. The substance of this video is that it all comes down to the specific case, and there's no cookie cutter approach. Opening the mind to the reality here is important, and understanding that a lot of things are not as they appear to be is going to really help you in navigating the problems and the challenges here. If you are fully aware of that, then you're already ahead of a lot of people who get burned daily, and you're going to do well, hopefully. And again, this was just an open discussion to share some of my experiences. Hopefully they can add some value to you in your journey if you're planning to buy a business or invest in the UAE. I hope you find this video